So, according to reports, U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping held their first meeting of Trump's second term in South Korea, reaching what Trump is described as an agreement on almost everything. The U.S. will reduce tariffs on Chinese goods from 57% to 47%, while China suspends new rare earth export controls and port fees, according to the agreement. Now, Beijing will resume large-scale purchases of American soybeans and farm products. And Trump announced plans to visit China in April, with Xi expected to visit the U.S. later. The trip capped Trump's Asia tour, marked by lavish receptions, trade deals, and diplomatic flattery from regional leaders. But then, how did these two leaders come to the table to discuss this? Because we know it's going to be beneficial if this deal can actually come through for the both of them. Liang, Chair, Professor of Economics at Willamette University, joins me to unpack this. Liang, thank you so much for coming around.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be with you.
Of course. So, after years of frosty relations and trade wars, many thought the U.S. and China would never meet halfway. Did you ever see this trade deal coming around?
Well, I think so. I think from China's perspective, they have been very clear in their stance, right? They would like to have cooperation, but they're not afraid of fighting a trade war. So when the opportunity arises where Trump now is willing to come to the table and talk, I think China is willing to negotiate. And from the U.S. point of view, I think their political economic pressures have been mounting when it comes to this tariff war. I think eventually have hurt their economy, their farmers, their political base of Trump. So I think they're more than happy to come back to the negotiation tables. I think the China's reciprocal, retaliation when it comes to rare earth control, I think it really hurts the U.S. where it hurts the most. And so I think it makes sense for the two sides to come together. And, as Xi Jinping talked about at the very beginning of the opening of their trade negotiation, that help to stabilize the trading relationships of the two largest economies is not only mutually beneficial, but it's really a responsible thing to do for the global, economy and the trading system as well.
Okay, so again, you say that China would be happy. Of course, we understand because the U.S. is planning to cut tariffs from 57 to 47%. But some analysts are saying it is not enough. So do you see it as a progress generally, or just maybe a token of diplomacy?
Well, I do think that it is a positive step in terms of, de-escalating the rising trade tensions prior to this. But I think, there's still a lot of structural issues when it comes to U.S.-China relations. And so even just in the trade regime, right, that there is a tariff cut, but 47% is still high. And also, I think when it comes to China's purchases of the, U.S. farm products, it is I think, friendly gesture from China's point of view. But at the same time, this tag restrictions that the United States has been imposing on China, and with very clear purpose of trying to handicap, right, China's technological development, I think that tension still remains. The U.S. wants to maintain its technological supremacy, and not seeing China as an equal partner in this regard, but really a strategic rivalry. So I think in terms of those deeper structural issues, those will continue to remain. But I think at least this trade truce, right, is what it is. It's going to help to provide some short-term stability. And hopefully, as you mentioned at the beginning, that there will be more, sort of state visits, right, between the two leaders. And hopefully that will help to buy some time and also develop a little bit more trust for further trade negotiations to continue.
Yeah, I like the way you put it. You talked about strategic rivalry. I mean, we see a China that is suspending new rare earth export controls and port fees for a year. So with its dominance in the global supply chain, what ripple effects do you think this would have, given that China's near monopoly in the global supply chain, it's still very much vibrant?
Right. I think when it comes to the trading relationship, I think China is taking a chapter from the U.S.'s, trade book, right? This idea that if the U.S. is trying to weaponize the global trading system and restrict technological exports to China, then China can reciprocate, China can retaliate. So you're right. As a matter of fact, I think not only the rare earths, but a lot of medical ingredients and so on and so forth, the U.S. pretty much rely on China's supplying chain 2 to 3 times more than the other way around. So I think in this case, China sees itself, has a leverage. And again, I think what China has or wants to do is to really promote the multilateral system, the trading system, to have this sort of mutual interdependence and also to have mutual equality and respect in that trading relationship. So this is the way China stands up for bully, right, against the bully, to say that if we want to trade, good, we wanted to have the equal relationship, we want to have the mutual win-win cooperation. But if you are weaponizing trade and having all these unilateral aggressions, then China is going to stand up to defend its own rights, its own interests, as well as upholding the global multilateral trading system.
Okay, so we understand that this trade deal had a couple of, steps around it. There were different deals that both superpowers had to come to agree to in principle. But then when you look at it holistically, from both sides of concessioning, who do you think stands to gain more from these deals? Is it Washington or Beijing?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I do think that, tough war or trade war produces lose-lose situation. So in this case, I think, having a trade truce to, in some ways, normalize trading relationship is going to be good for China, U.S., and the global economy as well, because, when the two elephants are fighting, right, the grass trampled. But that said, I do think that, at this point, those countries would like to see a little bit more, stability, right? I mean, the U.S.'s trade policy has been so capricious, and it has been, changing in such a unpredictable way. It really disrupts the global supply chain and investments and also its own domestic economy. So in that sense, I think having a trade truce is definitely helping the United States in this economy, managing inflation, managing expectations, managing, the government policies, and also some kind of restoring some of the U.S. credibility in that sense. And I think for China, they would like to see some normalization as well. Their trade actually has been holding up. Export has grown actually by 7% in the first 9 months. Even though, its export to the United States has declined by 27%, its trade with Africa, for example, has gone up by 27%, and with many other parts of the world as well. So, but at the same time, I think, as China wants to, cultivate its technological developments, wants to really have the sustainable development, it does want to have more friendly and stable external relationships. So in that sense, I think it's a win-win for both countries. And I also think that this is good for the global trading system as well, to have some predictability and rationality amidst, the previous chaos.
Well, so you are actually preaching optimism, most especially as it affects the global markets. But we know that these are two, should I call them Asian powers, who have engaged in trade tensions for a couple of years. So in terms of how both of them have come together and the agreements that they've, decided to consummate at this particular time, are we looking at a long-term global market stability? Or is it something that we just fizzle in just for a couple of months thereabouts, and we'll begin to see tensions rise again?
Well, I think that's a great question, and that is a $1 trillion question, right? I think, I'm cautiously optimistic, especially in the short term. I do think that the United States has realized fighting this trade war is doing a lot of damages to its own economy and its Donald Trump's own political base. So I think the U.S. would probably think twice if they wanted to continue to disrupt, right, their own economy and their own supply chain to fight this unwinnable trade war with China. So if the U.S. does get its act together, I do think that we're likely to see a little bit temporary sort of stability. But I think going forward, I think the challenges are still really much mounting, right, when it comes to this idea of strategic rivalry, when it comes to the U.S.'s continuous, use the global trading system and its technological advancement as a tool to trying to suppress China's technological development and its legitimate economic rights. So I can see the kinds of confrontation and sort of the battle, right, are probably going to continue. However, I do think that, China is trying to be playing in a more responsible way. And again, the United States may have learned the lesson, the fact that it can't just simply bully another country of equal economic size and, with a very complete supply chain. So hopefully the relationship will be more manageable going forward. So again, the differences, are not going to go away. But hopefully, both countries can manage their differences in a more responsible way and a more sensible way. Because again, that would be good for their own, economy and also for the global economy as well. And I also wanted to say that, China is, and I think the rest of the world, right, outside of the U.S. and China as well, are seeing, the U.S.'s policies and the way it disrupts the global system. So I think there has been some awakening, so to speak, for countries to try to work together and build this stronger partnership outside of the U.S.'s orbit. So I think that seems to be the trend going forward.
Okay, so finally, I don't know for how long China will be able to hold its resolve and stay diplomatic, but then I looked through the contents of those agreements and I discovered that China's frustration over U.S. export bans on advanced tech, including semiconductors, and even TikTok remained unresolved. It was like, it's in limbo. So should that be a bigger concern for you looking forward?
Well, I think from China's point of view, again, differences will remain. And again, Xi Jinping's opening speech is very revealing in that sense, because what he said is, look, China's growth, China's development should be a win for the United States. Why? Because it does provide demand. It does provide, a different set of technologies and, and also material, benefits for the United States. So China is not against the United States, right? China does not want to sort of take over the U.S.'s leadership or supremacy in that sense. So I think from China's point of view, and I think Xi Jinping has said this many times, right? The world is big enough for both U.S. and China. So with that wisdom in mind, right, with that rationality in mind, then I think, Xi Jinping also says that, conflicts and differences between two countries are normal, right? This is a normal thing that countries may not see eye to eye with each other all the time. So what really matters is how to manage, right? How to negotiate, how to find a way to live with each other, coexistence. I think that is the key. So based on, the challenges that you mentioned, which I completely agree, right? The TikTok deal or, going forward, the technological restrictions and rare earths and so on and so forth, those challenges will remain. No doubt, and that is going to be normal, right? But so again, the question is, how do we negotiate? How do we find a way to live with each other? How do we find a way to amend the differences and learn to gain from the kinds of interdependence, right? I think that is really the question, and I believe that China has the courage, the wisdom, and try to find a way to live with to co-live with the United States. And I think now the ball is kind of on the U.S. court, and how they're going to act would definitely determine, how this relationship is going to unfold I think in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. And we hope it's going to correct the trade imbalance between both countries and strengthen the ties in the long run. Liang, Chair, Professor of Economics at Willamette University, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.